Thanks so much. It's nice to be on your show.
You got it. I am a fan of Russian history, and this book sort of takes place right next to the Russian Revolution. Is that right?
Yeah, well, it's right in the heart of Moscow in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. Sort of the odd premise of the book, if you will, is that it opens at a Bolshevik tribunal in 1922, where a 30-year-old aristocrat who wrote a poem that was popular with the revolutionary generation as a young man, has fans in the party, but on the other hand, he's seen as an unrepentant aristocrat. So as something of a compromise, the tribunal says that he can go back to the Metropole Hotel where he's been staying, and if he ever comes out of the hotel again, he'll be shot. And sort of with the snap of the gavel, the book opens with him being marched out of the Kremlin, across Red Square, and through the doors of the historic Metropole Hotel, which is right around the corner from the Kremlin, and a few blocks from the headquarters of the secret police.
Now, this is a novel. This is not historical fiction or anything like that, right?
Yeah, this is a novel. You know, I think it's sort of an irony of our times that we've come to demand more factual accuracy from our novelists than from our presidential candidates. You know, but you know, a presidential candidate can make almost any claim and get away with it. But you know, a novelist, if you get the street address wrong, you get 10,000 emails. But this is a novel. It is very much, it takes place over 30 years. I am asking you to spend 30 years in this famous hotel with the Count as the Stalinist era unfolds. And the book is very true to the contours of Soviet history and very interested in the events of Soviet history, but they're not the focus. The focus is in the tradition of novels. It's about the individuals in the hotel there, and particularly the Count, and how he has to find sort of a new source of purpose now that he has been stripped of his possessions, family, and way of life, and left in this confined, if luxurious, space.
The book is called A Gentleman in Moscow. Amor Towles will be in St. Louis tomorrow for a book reading, and a book conversation. It is published by Viking. Amor, when you went to Viking and said, I have an idea, how about a story of a man in a hotel for 30 years? How did that pitch go over?
Yeah, not so well. I mean, they're very generous. They let me do what I want, but your point is well taken. If someone said to me, "Hey, here's my 450-page book," if the guy goes in a hotel, doesn't come out, I wouldn't be enticed. You know, I'd go in the other direction. But you know, that's part of the challenge. It's part of the interest for me as an artist. Is I have to take that confined environment and fill it with as much life, as much charisma, as much passion as possible, and history, and you know, so the world of Russia is coming through the doors of the hotel and going back out again to keep your interest. Frankly, I had to do that to keep my interest, right? Because if it takes you a couple of weeks to read the book, it took me 4 years to write it. But I think that's not uncommon. I don't want to compare myself to Herman Melville, but if you think of Moby Dick in this great American work, it's kind of what happens. You and Ishmael go on the boat after a few pages, and you're stuck there for the remainder of this very long novel in pursuit of the white whale. And that is a chance for Herman Melville to bring. He has to figure out how to bring the whole world of experience down into the boat through a wide variety of strategies. And this book kind of works on a similar principle.
Amor, is it true you were an investment guy for years?
Yeah, I mean, I've written since I was a kid and wrote in high school, college, graduate school, but I did get diverged and ended up in as an investment management business for 20 years. And eventually got back to writing at night and on the weekends. My first novel, Rules of Civility, was really written kind of in that way. When Rules of Civility was a success, I retired from my firm,
right.
And now I write full-time.
Yeah, now Rules of Civility was about the 1930s in Manhattan and so on and so forth. This is, you incorporate that 20s, 30s vision in this one as well, but from right next to the Kremlin. What's your love affair with the 20s and the 30s?
Yeah, you know, my interest in you kind of think of it as I love to write about 70 years ago, roughly 70 years ago. And the reason is because we all kind of have a rough familiarity with the events of 70 years ago from school and grandparents and, movies and what have you. But very few of us have a firsthand experience of 70 years ago, certainly not as adults. And that gives me some latitude. Because of the rough familiarity that readers will have from that time period, if I lay out some landmarks that they can recognize, I can sort of draw them into a sense of comfort that they are in the place and time. But because they don't have the first-hand experience, I can invent a whole array of things. And for the reader, it's not quite clear, is that thing made up or is that thing historical? And that's part of the fun and the adventure of using that time frame, is it is going to be a mix of history and invention.
When you started writing A Gentleman in Moscow, did you know where you were going? Did you have an outline, or did you?
Yeah.
Tell us.
I wrote a novel in my mid-30s. It took me 7 years, and I didn't like it, and I put it in a drawer. You can have it, but you spend 7 years working on a work of art, and you don't like it. You should investigate what went wrong. And the biggest mistake I made in that case was I had not outlined it. And a third of the way through, halfway through, three-quarters of the way through, I kept rediscovering or discovering what the book was about. And in essence, that would force you to go back to the beginning and reframe everything to now that you understand where you're going.
Right.
So in the case of Rules of Civility and in the case of Gentleman in Moscow, I spent several years outlining the book before I began writing it. Usually by the time I'm ready to write, my outline might be 40 or 50 pages long, with character studies, settings, every major event, the chapter outlines, some dialogue. I have a pretty strong foundation. Now, having said that, as you're writing, you do run into surprises, and that's part of the fun of the creative process. The characters surprise you, turn of events suddenly present themselves, and you have to sort of confront that with as much surprise as the reader is going to.
Tomorrow night, St. Louis County Library for a book signing and a book reading. Not only are you coming here in St. Louis, which I know these are well attended because people in St. Louis love to read, but you're going on a 20-city tour, which tells me that Viking and the people behind this book think you've sort of touched a nerve here, and that this is getting a lot of good attention, which is why they're sending you out to sort of sell the book, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're lucky to be invited to go out to speak about a book you've written, because you're right. These days, it's pretty uncommon, and if you're not invited, they shouldn't send you anyway.
Right.
But yes, I am doing some travel. I should say I don't think it's tomorrow night. I think it's a couple of nights from now. That's an easy mistake to make. It's probably our fault. But if you go to amortowles.com events. If you go to amortowles.com and go to the events page, you'll see when I'm at the St. Louis Library. It is later this week,
right.
In the second half of the week. But it is sort of fun to go across the country and talk about it. The book is just reached the New York Times bestseller list, so that's it's part of the trade, right?
Yeah.
You make the list because people are interested in the book and because you're willing to go out and talk to them about it. That's part of the sort of the pleasure. You think of it this way: writing a book, you're in a cave for a couple of years. And so this is the chance to come out of the cave and talk to people.
Willie, we'll check on that date. We'll have that date here in a second. Now, this count you have, who is in this hotel for 30 years, since he can't go see the world has to come see him. So,
that's right.
Are there real characters coming to see him in a fake world?
Yeah, there's a few appearances of historical figures, but for the most part they're invented, but they certainly are part of the fabric of Russian life at that time. I mean, there are representatives of the Kremlin. There's a poet who falls into disfavor and ultimately is arrested. There's a variety of people that are representative of the actual experiences of the time. Well, one of the great things about writing about this hotel, which, as I said, is real, the hotel is real, is that it is this paradox in Soviet Russia, and that the Bolsheviks initially seized it after the revolution to use it as kind of a headquarters and this big administrative building initially, because the Soviets moved the capital back to Moscow from St. Petersburg, so there was no infrastructure for the government. So they used hotels to achieve that. But they realized pretty quickly that as the ambassadors began showing up from London and Paris, the business executives began showing up from the West, from America, as the trade representatives showed up. If they put them in crummy hotels, those representatives from the West would think that the revolution had failed. So they kicked everybody out of the Metropole, all the party guys, and restored the hotel to this glamorous, pre-war type style with uniforms on the bellhops and doormen and caviar and champagne in the restaurant, and a jazz band, American-style jazz band in the dining room for dancing. It was all there in the hotel, really to impress the foreign visitors. But Russians would go and use the hotel ultimately. They would, if they had enough money, they would spend the evening there to celebrate and take advantage of the luxury and liberty of the hotel.
Does
So around the corner from the Kremlin, a few blocks from the secret police, was this oasis of more open and sort of glamorous life.
Yeah. Does Rasputin make an appearance?
He does not make an appearance yet.
What is it about Russian history, Amor Towles, that is so fascinating that if you spend 5 minutes scratching the surface, you will become a lover of Russian history?
Yeah, well, I think for me, and for many Americans, it starts with the great Russian novels. Tolstoy's War and Peace and Anna Karenina, Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, or the Brothers Karamazov, the short stories of Chekhov. All these were written in predominantly in a few decades in the back half of the 19th century. Turgenev, Gogol, it was really an incredible time for writing in Russia, and I think the Russian style, the Russian interests have their own characteristics, and the book certainly is paying tribute to the Russian interests. But I think if you wanted to point to one thing that kind of intrigues me about the history of Russia, is the reminder for us that when Napoleon in 1812 marched, he invaded Russia after a great cost of soldiers. He eventually made his way to Moscow. He seized the Kremlin, taking control of Russia. His first night there, while he was in bed in the Kremlin, the people of Moscow set the city on fire. And they set the fires where the prevailing winds would drive the fire across the city, in essence saying, we love our country, our culture, our history, but there's no way we're going to hand it over to the victor. And it tells you a lot about the Russian character. That on the one hand they would be very proud of this ancient heritage, of its art, its history, but on the other hand that they would be willing to destroy it rather than put it in the hands of Napoleon. And I think you've seen this kind of very strong-willed, patriotic, and yet willing to make sacrifices mindset throughout Russian history.
The book is called A Gentleman in Moscow. Amor Towles is our guest. The book, as he said, just hit the New York Times bestseller list. His last book was there for a long time, Rules of Civility. He'll be in St. Louis. We checked. It's Thursday. I don't want to scare you, Amor. You're going to be here Thursday, not tomorrow night, so relax.
Thank you very much.
It's Thursday night, 6 p.m., St. Louis County, for a reading and a signing. Amor, good luck with the book. Thanks for stopping by, and hope you enjoy St. Louis.
Thanks.